Hey there, Prairie Plant Girl here. Today I'm out in the greenhouse. It's a cold, blustery day. They're actually calling for a mix of rain and snow today. So hopefully it's just rain. It's not a beautiful day, but it's beautiful in the greenhouse, and I'm gonna plant some potatoes. So I've been kind of keeping my eye out for seed potatoes to come out in the stores. I've ordered my seed potatoes for years, but I thought I would go back to just getting them locally because I don't really remember why I went away from that. There's a lot of varieties available locally these days, which I think might have been the reason why I wasn't getting them locally before, is you couldn't get very many varieties, but now there's quite a few out there. So I thought I would just pick some up, and yesterday when I was out shopping, I found some potatoes. So this is a new variety to me, this Gemson. And this is a 1 kg bag, which I believe is 2 pounds approximately. And you may have seen on there, it was about $10. So that means it's a little bit of a more specialty potato, I'm guessing, because I also picked up a bag of like Norland, which is a pretty common variety around here. And they were the same price for twice as many seed potatoes. So seed potatoes, that's what these are. They're certified stock, so they should be disease-free, and they're just little potatoes that will sprout, and you plant them in the ground, and all these little sprouts that are coming off of them will grow a plant up out of the ground, and roots will come down out of this, and the root area is where you'll get your new potatoes from. So this is what you plant usually when you're planting potatoes. You usually don't get a potato seed. You can, and I'm not super knowledgeable about the process of that, but I think when you get a potato seed, you'll get like maybe one potato or just a potato plant off, and you have to plant it again, whereas this will give you lots and lots of potatoes off of this single seed potato. So this part doesn't grow. This part is just the nutrients to get the plant started, and it will kind of be used up, but you'll just have kind of a husk of a skin left usually at the end of the season when you're harvesting, and there'll just be a lot of potatoes underneath it. So these have already sprouted really nicely. They don't have to be sprouted out, but it can just kind of speed up the process. So if you want to get some seed potatoes sprouted, and maybe you have some potatoes either from some that you dug up last year that were nice and healthy plants, or maybe you purchased seed potatoes and they haven't sprouted yet, you can just set them in a warm space out of direct sun, and they should sprout within a few days to a week. You want nice little compact sprouts like this. Big long ones have already used a lot of energy out of the potato that you won't really get the benefits from having a big long sprout coming off of it, where this is kind of ideal for what you want. So I'm going to be planting these in buckets today. I don't feel like digging out in the ground today, and I thought I'd bring you along just to show you my process. So I'm going to bring you down on the ground where the buckets are, and we'll get a few of these potatoes planted. So it's really easy to plant seed potatoes. I just have my buckets here. I have 3 big buckets. My seed potatoes, and I'm going to be adding in some bone meal to my buckets. You could use any other sort of fertilizer that you want, and I will come in later on and fertilize these a little bit, as long as I remember. You don't need a ton of fertilizer for potatoes, but you do want a soil that is a little more on the acidic side. Soil that is more alkali or more base can lead to scab for your potatoes. So you want just a little bit higher acidity. So if you don't have that, you might want to be adding an acidifier. I use a lot of peat moss in my planting beds, and I don't worry about that a whole lot. I am going to add the bone meal. Bone meal has a high phosphorus number, and phosphorus can help in root development. So that's what I like to start off with my potatoes. And I'm just going to work it into my bucket of soil here. Get it down in the root zone as much as I can. And that'll just help with good root development. This soil is out of a a planting bed, a fabric planting bed that I had in my greenhouse before, and I've moved it out. As you can see, I'm working on getting some proper shelving in here for my plants. I do plan to put a video out for that, so watch for it if you want to know more about how to do that. But anyways, this soil is out of those beds, and it's a mix of good quality vegetable potting mix and my own homemade compost. I just want to get a bit more bone meal down at the bottom here. So I'm not setting the seed potato on the bone meal, but I am getting it worked into that soil down at the bottom. So I want to plant them down quite deep. Now, sometimes you'll see on instructions for planting potatoes to just plant them just a little ways, and you can do that, but then you're going to have to come and cover them over again later. So what I'm going to do is take a little bit of the soil out for right now. So now I have a good, I don't know, hand span, what's that, about 6 to 8 inches, 15, 20 centimeters depth to the soil in here. And I'm going to put my potatoes in here, and they'll grow the roots down, and they'll grow the potatoes around where they're planted. So I'm going to just bury them down about 3 inches or so, and that's about 8 centimeters, I think. And then I'll just let them sprout, and then I'll put the soil that I took out back on top of them after they've started to sprout, and just let them grow that way until they hit the top of the soil's at the top of the pot, and then I'll stop covering them and just let them grow that way. Now you could just bury them really deep, but because it's a little bit cool in here, I want the sun and the warmth to hit the top where the potatoes are planted to get them sprouted and going. If it was warmer out, then you could just plant them down really deep and just let them grow, and they'll be fine. But the soil is cool in here. It's definitely workable. It's definitely not frozen at all, but it is still getting cool in here. Like I said, they're calling for possible snow today. So I guess I didn't turn the camera on when I adjusted it for you to see me plant these. So I just dug these potatoes up, and I'm gonna plant them again so you can see what I'm doing. Again, not rocket science, but just set them in. Some people will tell you to worry about which way these little sprouts are facing, but I planted potatoes for my parents for years, and I'll tell you, as a child, all we did was toss them in the hole. So I'm just digging down a little bit, drop it in, dig down a bit, drop it in, cover it back over, and they're good to go. Now, like I said, once they start to shoot up sprouts, I will cover them over again. It's not totally necessary, but I don't know. I just have always found that my potatoes grow better when they're buried deep. When potatoes get too hot, which they can get easily here in Saskatchewan, Canada, then they just don't do as well. So if you have a good covering of soil over them, that will help to keep the potatoes that are growing cooler, the roots cooler, and they do better that way. That's partly why I think sometimes growing potatoes in containers here in Saskatchewan doesn't do as well unless you have a nice big container. So I put 3 seed potatoes in this container. It's about 15 or so inches across and tall. I put 2 in this slightly shorter pot. It's almost the same diameter, a little bit smaller. And then I put 3 in this pot here. And I've labeled the sides of my pots with the variety name, how many seed potatoes I put in, and the date. So I'll know approximately when to harvest, and just knowing how many potatoes I put in gives me a good idea when I'm getting the yields out of it, if that was a good yield or not. So that's all I do. And that's why I bury them a bit deeper. You don't really need to bury them deep. You just need to make sure that the potatoes that are growing aren't exposed to sunshine. So if the potatoes start sticking up above the soil surface, you definitely need to cover them over with soil or straw or something to keep the sun off of them, because otherwise they'll get green spots. It's a chemical process from the sunshine hitting the potato, and those parts of the potato are no good. You'll have to cut them off. They're not usable. So just keeping them covered keeps that from happening, keeping them deep. And like I said, it just keeps them cooler. It gets really hot here, and I think that's, we have a short season. We can't pick the shoulder seasons here in Saskatchewan to grow our potatoes to maturity and avoid the hottest weather like you might be able to do down south. So we just have to bury them deep so that they grow better. Hopefully this gave you some inspiration maybe to go out and plant potatoes. If you're having nicer weather than me and your soil is workable, you can be planting your potatoes outside right now, even in Saskatchewan, even though we're about a month away from our average last frost. I could easily be out putting my potatoes in my raised beds or in the ground, as long as it's not soaking, soppy, wet. You squeeze soil and water's dripping out of it. That's too wet. Your potatoes will rot. And if it still has a lot of ice, if you're having to chip through it, not great. But I've actually dug down and hit frozen soil and planted my potatoes on top of that, as long as we're going to be having warm weather in the forecast. And sorry, just found a centipede in my potato pot. And I can never remember, is it centipedes or the millipedes that'll eat the potatoes? The organic matter. One of them eats bugs, one of them eats organic matter. Can't remember. Took it out. Anyways, little distraction there. So you can certainly be out planting outside as long as your soil is workable and, not too soaking wet. But today, it's not a very nice day out. I chose to plant mine in my buckets in my greenhouse because I want some here anyways. So thanks for hanging out with me in my greenhouse for a little bit today. Get out there and get some potatoes planted if that's something on your list of things to plant. And we'll see you in the next video. Thanks for watching. Bye.